quick 2.5-minute video basically outlining exactly what Cop City is all about, what's happening there, and why this is not such a good thing.
Yeah.
This is a protest against Cop City, which is the 85-acre police training compound that the city of Atlanta wants to build in the middle of a protected forest area. There have been activists that have been staged in the trees in the forest there now for almost a year. And they've been cleaning out the camp the last few weeks. It ended up with a standoff where one of the defenders was killed by a Georgia State trooper.
Oh, shit. Is this target practice? You fucked your own officer up.
We will not die in vain. We will keep fighting to stop Cop City from being built. We will continue to fight until Cop City is no longer trying to be built.
Attorneys representing the family of Manuel Esteban Paez-Terán put out a statement tonight saying the autopsy shows Paez-Terán's hands were raised when officers shot and killed the protester in January. It also says that both of Paez-Terán's palms show exit wounds and that the activist was, quote, most probably in a seated position, cross-legged when killed.
The policing promoted by this facility will not make Atlanta safer. In fact, it will put our communities, particularly our black and brown communities, in significant danger. Research shows that as police forces in the United States become more militarized, they become more violent.
And what do you do? Go against what where's your heart?
Well, we work on healing, we work in caring ourselves, and we work on future plans. Now is the Stop Cop City, but we will need the 70,000 signature from people from Atlanta. So we have to go through everybody from Atlanta that is a voter to do that. The problem is that there is no information about that. The media have to say it. The media have to help the community, but they don't do that.
It's infuriating to me. I'm just sitting here and I just literally said to him, I'm like, they killed a tree hippie. Like, it's like the fact that, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, but anyway, let's get into it.
Anna Riley is a writer and activist and is covering Cop City directly in the greater Atlanta area. And this is, like I said, it is a very significant issue because this is a test. This is a test to see whether or not the powers that be can get away with an implementation of a police state. This is just the beginning. And if we do not at least give every effort to stop this dead in its tracks, it's going to spread everywhere. Anna Riley, welcome to Generational Change.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I first saw you talking to RJ Escow. And I always tend to drop in on his show because I always get a really good idea of good people to talk to. So I really appreciate you coming on and talk about this. We've mentioned Cop City before at different points in the news cycle. But I really think it's important for people to understand the big picture as to what they're trying to do here. You know, yep. This isn't just we're going to put some nice little training facility there. This is a lot bigger than that. So could you talk about like when this started? Because this has been going on for a couple of years. And
yes.
So will you take us back to the beginning and is like what the plan is and how it, because I know it's private businesses like Home Depot and whatnot that are involved, but if you would start from the beginning with this.
Yes. Hard to know exactly when the beginning is. I think I'd go back to 2017. So the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is a nonprofit, you know, sort of shadowy corporate money Dave Wilkinson, who's their CEO, earns, I think, over $500,000 a year. He's, the highest compensated of any person in that position across the country. They have an enormous amount of influence in Atlanta. So it was their idea. Again, this is a private nonprofit, went to the city of Atlanta and basically requested that the South River Forest, which was supposed to be public parkland in perpetuity, it's, a very beloved green space for the folks who live along it. It's, critically important as we enter this new era of the climate crisis. It's a bulwark against flooding and heat waves. And, I could talk about the good things that trees do against extreme weather.
We can get into the environmental thing after. Like, let's almost like table that, because that's a whole other, I feel like that's a whole separate,
It is. So basically, this has been a public plan since the summer of 2021. It was incredibly unpopular from its inception, whether it was, neighborhood groups, folks who live alongside the forest, like I said, environmentalists, police and prison abolitionists, people with some passing interest in seeing democracy done in their city. So opposed from the get, pretty organized opposition from the get. In 2021, again, just months after this was proposed, there was 17 hours of public comment. This was still during the pandemic, so it happened over Zoom. I don't think that we actually know if the city council members listened to it, but it was record breaking at the time. And, the meeting went on 2 days because there was so much opposition. And then they immediately went and signed this lease with the Atlanta Police Foundation. That was in September of 2021. And for the better part of a year following that, folks were living, forest defenders were living among the trees that they were hoping to save. He had tree sits built, this really incredible intentional community that was built in the forest. And as we just saw in that video, that is obviously no longer the case. Georgia State Patrol officers murdered Tortuguita, again, as we saw, who was sitting in their tent in the forest, public forest land in January of this year. There have been over 40 domestic terrorism convictions of organizers and activists involved. Some bail fund organizers were, given really shoddy financial crime charges. So it has been an intersectionally opposed project from the beginning. And as it's gotten, more and more attention, both within the state and nationally and internationally, the city and sort of the corporate backers of this project seem to be digging their heels in even more.
Yeah, I could talk about this from so many different angles. I find the entire thing from start to finish just completely infuriating.
Yeah.
The aspect, to me, there's almost like, I feel like I want to look at it from the two angles of, one, who's profiting? Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. Somebody at the end of the food chain is making a lot of money from this, whether it's the military-industrial complex and all the, the over-militarization of police. Like, there's the angle, because nobody's doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. And, and as much as I love firefighters, even throwing them in there as potential beneficiaries doesn't work for me. So there's that corruption aspect. And then there's this, why Atlanta? And why, and I have my thoughts about why Atlanta, and I'm curious what you think as to why Atlanta. But it isn't because, that's where there was space. No, man. In lots of places, there's space. You can put it right in there's cornfields in Iowa. Like, there's lots of places where you could put this. So let's talk about that first. Like, why Atlanta? Like, why do you think?
I think that Atlanta represents, it's a very unique city. I don't know if the term the Atlanta way is something that you've heard of, but that gets bandied around a lot here. It used to be sort of said as a good thing, I think, or if not good, at least neutral. And I think it's deeply not a good or neutral thing. So the Atlanta way kind of represents this relationship between the white elite in the city and the Black politicians who tend to be sitting in the seats of power. Kind of this unspoken agreement that as long as we're all sort of in the service of capital together, then we can agree and sort of pretend that Atlanta is the city too busy to hate, which is something that it like credulously calls itself. So yeah, it's a rapidly gentrifying city. It used to be a majority Black, and it is no longer majority Black. Its politics are changing. Obviously, it was blue in the last election. There's been a ton of money poured in here from sort of the Democratic infrastructure across the country. And to speak to your question of who is profiting off of this, that's complicated, and it's there's a very long question of who profits off of just policing in general, which is capital and whiteness. In this specific instance, there's a lot of stuff going on. The timing is intentional, right? This happened. Basically, the plans were announced after Rayshard Brooks was murdered while he was asleep in his car at a Wendy's drive-through in Atlanta, just I think weeks after George Floyd's murder.
It was from that summer. It was a result of the George Floyd summer and the protests.
Yes. Yep. So sort of this idea that the city can say Atlanta is a place that likes to attract a lot of we say we're very business friendly as a state, which is true. And I think this represented a way for the city to say, look, we're not going to have anything like what happened in 2020 ever happen again. We're building this state-of-the-art center where we can both sort of reassure developers and other folks who might want to come and park their money in the city of Atlanta that your capital is safe here, and that we have enough of a police state that you don't have to worry about things like this happening again. And then again, there's also the complicated sort of private finance aspect of this. A lot of banks and contractors and bigger corporations in the city of Atlanta who sort of are compelled to support these projects because of the power that policing holds in the city and the Atlanta Police Foundation specifically. These are all very long answers. I hope that was enough.
No, it was good.
We're speaking with Hannah Riley of Stop Cop City. The thing that I don't think people really fully grasp, and we see this a lot since Jen ran for Congress against DWS. One thing that I think a lot of people really don't understand is that when it comes to political bribery, there are people that require hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on the take, and then there are those that take maybe a few $1,000s to be on the take. The Fraternal Order of Police as a whole is a very aggressive union organization when it comes to their political giving. They do lean to the political right, but they, much like Big Pharma, Big Insurance, they own both sides.
Yeah, they hedge their bets.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter. Can you talk about the issue that exists there when it comes to political bribery and why this is happening and why so many people like John Ossoff look the other way?
I mean, you can ask John Ossoff why he looked the other way. I don't have a good answer for that, except that it's he's made the calculation that he is not able to say anything that might be construed as remotely negative when it comes to policing in the state of Georgia. I think that's a failed calculation, and that he'll probably figure that out in good time. But I would say that this is pretty pedestrian corruption. This is how
very run of the mill.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is representing anything particularly new or egregiously corrupt, especially when it comes to Atlanta. I think what has happened is this interesting confluence of things, including just the timing, that has meant that this is the sort of project that they could do, under the radar for the last sort of 40 plus years. And now increasingly at every turn there's a bit more of an interested local media ecosystem. I think it's actually pretty important to talk about that when it comes to corruption. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is a fairly corporate outlet. They are owned and funded and very deeply connected with the Atlanta Committee for Progress. Their chair is the same as the chairperson of that committee. This is, it says it has progress in the name, but it's not really.
Right. Well, they must be progressive. I mean, they must be if it says so.
Exactly. And it has all the famous progressives, like the CEOs of all the largest Fortune 500 companies
Real
in this
working
country.
people, real working people heroes.
Yeah, salt of the earth, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.